Good Saturday morning, everybody. I'm meteorologist Tim Pandages here with your Atlantic tropical update. We're talking about Larry still, which has gone post-tropical and is now headed towards the Arctic Circle, and Invest 93L and 94L that could potentially become our next two named storms. September 11th, 2021. Let's get a broad look of what's going on in the basin right now. Larry, no longer a hurricane, is now post-tropical. Invest 93L that's emerging off of the coast of Africa near the Cabo Verde Islands. 50% chance in the next 2 days of developing. 70% chance within the next 5. Below that, another tropical wave, 20% chance of developing, and then Invest 94L that could bring the most imminent threat to land in the next 24 hours. In fact, it's already impacting land with some very heavy rainfall through the Yucatan and the southern Gulf of Mexico, the Bay of Campeche. So where are we right now in our Atlantic tropical names? Well, Mindy was last. If you remember that little blip in the forecast, that was pretty much here and then gone within 24 hours or so. Topped out at a tropical storm just before landfall. Late last week or late this week. And then next up is Nicholas, and then maybe we get Odette too before the week is out with 93L emerging off the coast. Now, we just hit the peak of the season yesterday on September 10th. And I don't want you to think that the worst is past us, because there are several notable storms that have occurred past the peak of the season. We still have a very active second half of September. October is typically very active too, and then things really start to die down as we get through November, and the season wraps up by November 30th. But some notable names here. Back in 2018, we had Florence that you remember brought drenching rains to North Carolina and disastrous flooding. We also had Matthew that impacted close to the same area, coastal Virginia and North Carolina, back in 2016. And the big one, Category 4 Hazel, back in 1954, occurred in the middle of October. So still plenty of warm waters, plenty of favorable atmospheric conditions that can help strong storms gain strength and impact land areas, even though we're past the peak of the season. Let's talk quickly about Larry. Not much going on with it anymore. It did impact Newfoundland, which is the first storm to make landfall there since 2010, and Igor moved on through there. It is hauling to the north-northeast, 48 miles per hour, still packing winds of 70 miles an hour. Now, you may be asking yourself, what does it mean it's going post-tropical? Well, simply, it no longer has enough tropical characteristics to be considered a tropical system. Its wind field is spreading on out. It's no longer getting all of its energy from the warm ocean waters. It's transitioning and having fronts develop and troughs with it as well. It's heading towards the Arctic Circle, and I thought this is actually really interesting. As it builds to the north, it's encountering cold air, obviously, as you'd expect, farther to the north, and bringing heavy snowfall to areas well to the north. Its wind field is expanding, but it's not as strong. You're no longer finding the strongest winds at the immediate center of this system anymore. 39-mile-an-hour winds considered tropical storm force now extend out 210 miles from the center, and around 58 miles per hour greater, up to 90 miles from the center. Here's how it looks on future track heading up to the Arctic Circle. Look at the amount of snowfall coming on through Greenland, 2 to 5 feet of snow. Iceland getting in on the action too with some gusty winds, maybe some snow in the higher elevations there. Also an interesting aspect here, remember how we talked about Larry being around for so long, moving relatively slowly? Well, it's left a scar in the Atlantic in terms of extracting so much heat energy from the ocean. It's dropped its temperatures and mixed up some cooler waters to replace that. So you can see that scar right through the middle of its track, and this is the area that it maintained its major hurricane status for roughly 4 days, and that's the longest period for major hurricane status since Dorian back in 2019. So interesting to see that there. These will recover in due time. We still have the high sun angle and a lot of heat energy that'll replace that. But storm lifetimes from a tropical depression so far this season, how long each system has been around, how many advisories have been issued on it. Well, up until Larry, we had Fred that was around for 11 days, but Larry, 12 days. Now the longest lasting tropical system so far this year. First advisory came out on it on August 31st, and the last few are coming today on the 11th of September. Now let's talk about Invest 94L. A quick refresher on what exactly Invest means. It's short for investigative area. 94 is a meaningless number. It's basically just to keep track of the systems. It goes from 90 to 99, and then we cycle on through it again. I think this is like our third time going through the Invest cycles. And the L determines that it's in the Atlantic Basin. If we were talking about an Eastern Pacific system, it would be an E instead of an L next to it. 70% chance of developing here. I'll go back quickly and show you on infrared. It's a very broad wave, nothing really organized here at all. It's encountering some wind shear that's halting any organizational development at the moment, and it is centered over land too. Once it moves over the southern Bay of Campeche, very warm ocean waters there. This has fostered an environment that's been feasible for storms to get very strong. Example being Grace, that moved on through this area to the north, and this is expected to track north, and as it does so, overall environmental profiles will start to be a little more favorable. That's why chances of this becoming a named system, Nicholas, in the next 2 days is higher, 70% now, a little bit higher within 5 days as it slowly slides north through those very warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico. On visible satellite imagery, not much difference. You can maybe pick out a little more broad spin in the atmosphere. Again, there's no center of circulation here, but modeling right now is taking this pretty much right along the coastal topography of Mexico, the Gulf of Mexico side, and keeping it over open water. If this was to track over land, obviously it wouldn't develop and organize. It'd be away from its fuel source. But most models, a good consensus here, keeping it just offshore, right along some very deep, warm waters, moving towards the north and potentially towards southeastern Texas. In fact, it's looking very likely we see that come there. And as it does so, it's dragging up a lot of tropical moisture. PWATS, precipitable water values here, are in the range of 2.5 to 3 inches. Now, what that exactly is when you take a column of air from where we all live on the surface up to around 34,000 feet where planes fly, you compress that column of air and you squeeze out all the moisture. When you've got a lot of moisture in the air, you'll squeeze out several inches of liquid. And with this air mass, you're squeezing out anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5 inches of water. Very moist atmosphere, and that's going to be wrung out in the form of heavy downpours and a very heavy rain flooding threat through southeast Texas. For development purposes of this system, we've got the warm waters. These waters have been undisturbed by any tropical systems thus far this season. You notice the difference between the eastern Gulf and the western Gulf. Several systems have moved through here, and despite that, still very warm waters in the mid-80s. Warm enough to support tropical development. But these are even warmer, and the ocean heat content extends down to a depth, meaning that you're not finding just these warm temperatures on the skin of the water. It extends down to a depth, so if a storm does come through and upwell it, it's just going to upwell warm waters. Now, if it's moving slowly, that could be detrimental to it developing. It'll upwell cooler waters because it's not moving fast enough. But we'll see what happens here. Right now, models are moving it pretty slowly through that area. Now, what's going on with it right now? Well, we've had Olaf out in the eastern Pacific. It is now dissipated, but some of that outflow aloft is actually enacting some wind shear out of the southwest from this, likely some outflow from the Olaf creating this. So that's slowing the storm's development, at least for right now. But as we go forward and play things out on the modeling, it does get to be more conducive. Now, wind shear, by the way, is a change in wind speed and direction the higher up you go in the atmosphere. Why that's detrimental to storms developing is because tropical systems are vertical engines. They're building vertically. And when you get wind shear that's changing and getting faster and changing direction the higher up you go, these building thunderstorms get cut off at the top. The wind's blowing and it blows the tops off the thunderstorm, so they can't build vertically and they become tilted. When there's not wind shear, they're able to build vertically and stack and get stronger as a result, and that is potentially a possibility here as we get towards, say, tomorrow night into Monday, Tuesday, slowly progressing towards the southeast Texas coastline. Now, we've talked a lot about the rain. I'm not so much concerned with this being a strong storm, but it's just going to have so much tropical moisture with it that we're going to see a heavy rainfall threat through much of the southeast coast, extending all the way into Louisiana as well. The southeast Texas coast, I should say. Now, what's working in our favor here, especially in the Texas area, Houston area, the bayous are running low, river levels are low. It's been relatively dry for the past couple weeks. And with that being said, the ground is also now in a better state to absorb a lot of rain. So if we do spread out these rainfall totals, which, by the way, are very impressive, 6 to 12 inches of rain, locally higher amounts than that, according to the European model, we may be able to handle that a little bit better spread out over time. Of course, you have the porous surfaces, the semi-porous, non-porous surfaces that are not going to absorb any of that water, so you'll still have flooding issues in the problematic areas, but overall, this is looking like a flooding threat for most of southeast Texas. Now, for comparison here, this isn't set in stone. For comparison, the GFS is saying, hold on a second, I think the heaviest rain will be offshore and to the east. Still flooding threat here out towards Lake Charles in Louisiana, but that would spare most of southeast Texas from extremely heavy rain, still picking up several inches there, but would keep the heaviest rain offshore. This will change. The GFS and European models run 4 times a day, so we will get an update on this in the next couple of hours and likely see it shift around before we get towards this time frame through next week, so we'll have to watch it carefully. In terms of the storm developing itself, let's compare the models now, the GFS and the European. GFS in yellow, European in red. And when you get a closed center of circulation, you see that closed circle, that isobar is closed. That means the storm has developed there, and we could have tropical depression by the time we get towards tomorrow or even into Monday morning in early hours. It's scraping along the coast of Mexico, the Gulf of Mexico side, and then potentially somewhere in Brownsville, Texas at this point, tropical depression, low-grade tropical storm, and then moving over land. But again, with that onshore flow funneling in that tropical moisture, it's going to mean a lot of heavy rain for most of those areas. Here's how now it looks on the European model with the moisture profiles and rainfall activity put on it. You can see that X depicting where the center of that storm may potentially be by the time we get to Monday. And you see the rainfall just getting pulled in onshore and over Houston. I mean, we've got heavy rain here for days before things start to quiet on down a bit by the end of the week. I said we have one more wave out there, Invest 93L, and this is way out there. This just came off the coast of Africa, over the Cabo Verde Islands right now. Not all that impressive looking, but the models do like this, heading off to the west and strengthening. That's why it's got a 50% chance in 2 days, 70% chance within 5, and the next name on the list there, if we do get Nicholas out of 94L, would be Odette. All right, I know that was a lot there, but until next time, if you have any questions, Twitter, Instagram, and on Facebook, we'll have an update for you if anything changes, and when we do finally get that depression named, and eventually a named storm, Nicholas, we'll bring you the latest there. But until then, enjoy the rest of your Saturday. We'll see you next time.